for our ones that aren't here. So that's what's been going on, and now we're going to turn our attention to Mark chapter 12. I'm not going to go through every story this morning, but I will remind you of a few of them. Towards the end, there was the story of the woman who gave just a little bit. There's other people would come to the temple and they would put a lot in. But this woman, she gave a little. So the story behind that is that God sees more than what you do. He sees the condition of the heart behind your giving. Milos can come in here and he might be a rich man and he gives to the Lord $1 million. Well, that's because he's got $500 million, okay? It's not much for him to give $1 million, right, Milos? Right. Nikolai comes in here and he's broke, and all he gives is a crusty French fry. Okay, maybe not a crusty French fry. But he gives very little, and but the Lord sees the heart. That's the concept of what he was getting at. So we're going to turn here to Mark in chapter 12. Okay. We also see here that the very first thing it talks about is a parable of the vineyard. So the concept is the vineyard was God's property. He let someone take care of it, and that someone began to claim it as their own, and then they began to destroy what God had, is the concept. And so the end of the story is that God says, or that Jesus says, that he's going to come and destroy those that he put in charge of this. Particularly here, Jesus was talking about the Jewish people. God had let them in charge of this, but they completely destroyed it, and they ruined the whole purpose of it. And so particularly that's the story, but how does that matter to us? Well, if God's put us in charge of something, we must be careful how we take care of it. I believe God has put me in charge of trying to operate church and missions. And I can become lazy. I can become to forget about God and not care and do my own thing. This is a good story to remind me that this is not my property. You're not my property. Okay? That baby's not my property. Amen? It's the Lord's. And we need to make sure that we treat everything that's the Lord's as the Lord's. So this is that first story. I'm going to give you one story here that we're going to focus on, and I hope it's a blessing to you. I want to give you an overview. This next story here, we talk about they wanted to flatter Jesus. They caught him, and they wanted to catch him in his words. And when they came, it says here, when they were come to Jesus, it says here that they came to him, and they said, Master, we know that you are true, and you care for no man, which means like you're not, how do I say this? I cherish your opinion of me, and when you don't like me, that hurts my feelings, okay? Man or woman, all right? If you go out of here and say, oh, that Matt Miller's crazy, that would hurt my feelings, okay? But here he's saying that, Jesus, you don't care what people think about you. You're a strong man. For you regard us not the people of men, persons of men, but you teach the way of God in truth. So they were religious people coming to basically flatter Jesus and then trying to catch him in something. And here they're going to try to catch him when it comes to finances. Now, this is particularly about paying taxes. And Jesus, they asked Jesus, how should we pay our taxes, or should we give our money to God? Which one's more important? And Jesus said, you don't have to pay your taxes. It's no problem. She says, no, he didn't say that. And that should be a warning to us as well, because these people were making a lot less money even than the Serbians are today, okay? But guess what happened? He said, give to Caesar. Basically, pay your taxes. And that was a little bit of offensive, because they were kind of hoping that maybe he wouldn't say that. But no, this section here talks about paying the taxes. Okay, we're going to skip this next part. This orange part here, we talk about loving God. It says here, they ask him, what's the biggest law? Again, all this is happening in the temple. And previously, we found out that Jesus overthrew the tables. He did some very not nice things, you might say, and he's come back. So he's really provoking, really is what he's doing. And so I'm going to put this over here for a moment. So this orange part talks about loving the Lord thy God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first commandment he talks about. But then the second is like unto it, loving your neighbor as yourself. So Jesus is teaching all these concepts in the temple in front of all these religious people. But where am I going to park at today? Maybe I would park here. When I mean by park, I mean to settle down and to preach. Maybe we would talk about this next part, about the religions. And again, Jesus spends a lot of his time teaching against religions or against religious ideas. What is religion? Religion is this concept of having a form of godliness without God. You look around the world, we have a form of godliness. We do things in a certain way, but yet we don't know God. This is religion. And so he teaches against religion. And here he was teaching against the Jewish religion because they claimed to be walking for God or doing God's ways, but they had no idea what God wanted for them. But I'm actually going to spend our time in verse 18. This green section here, that's what we're going to be today. You know, one of my tasks as a pastor is to get to know you. Get to know you so I can learn your sins and so I can point them out. Just kidding. Partly. No. But I get to know who you are and the struggles that we have in our lives. Something that was in my life and I still struggle with today is something that maybe some of you and many of you struggle with as well. In this area right here, the Sadducees, or they are a group of religious people that came to Jesus, but they don't believe in the resurrection. Okay, these are religious Jewish people that believe when you die, you just cease to exist. You're done. So basically, what you need to do now is to have your best life now. That's the concept of most Americans, most Russians, most Serbians say, hey, live your best life now because that's all you got. You know, he who dies with the most toys wins, someone might say. That's what my old friends used to say anyways. But here, these religious people come to Jesus and they ask him a question trying to trick him up about the resurrection because they had these laws about people dying and about marrying the wife. So I think it goes that if my brother dies, correct me if I'm wrong, then I'm required to marry my sister-in-law. Right?
To give at least one.
If she has no children.
If she has that, you are obligated to make one, at least one.
Right, but if she has children, that's not a deal. But if she doesn't have children, I have to give her a child. You know. So that's the way it was, and so they're asking these questions about these wives. Now, I'm not preaching you this message today because I don't believe you have a problem with having many wives. That's not the issue, okay? I'll tell you what the issue is, but let's read this again. It says here, they came to Jesus, the Sadducees, and they asked him a question about the resurrection. It says here that Moses wrote unto us, if a man's brother die and leave his wife behind him, and she have no children, that his brother should take his wife and raise up seed to his brother. Now, there were 7 brethren, and the first took a wife, and dying, she had no children. And the second married her. These are all brothers. And he took her, and she had no children. And the third took her, but they had no children. And the 7th, all the way up to the 7th, all brothers married her. Okay, you see this extreme situation here. All 7 brothers married her, and none of them give this woman a child. They all die. In the resurrection, I can just see them like this, like so. In the resurrection. Okay. And they says, which wife will she be? Or which husband? The one she loved the most? The one that had the most money? Will she get to choose? Will it be the first husband? Answer this one, Jesus. You could almost see him saying, like, Jesus says this. Jesus answered and said to them, You err, basically. Ye not therefore err, because ye know not the scriptures, and you don't know the power of God. He says that, of course, there is no resurrection. No. This is the interesting part to me. It says this, For when they shall rise from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels which are in heaven. Okay, this doesn't mean we'll become angels. This just means in our daily lives, we'll be operating similar to the lives of angels. Okay, basically not given in marriage is one of the things it talks about specifically. And as touching the dead, he answers both questions about the wives and then about the dead. Now you answer the first question about the wives. In heaven, we don't do that. Okay. Secondly, about the dead. I want to talk to you about that for a second. About them rising from the dead. Have you not read in the book of Moses how in the bush God spake to him, and God spake to Moses in the bush, and he said this, I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Particularly, not I was the God of Abraham, I was the God of Isaac, I was the God of Jacob. No, he said, I am, currently. So God was referencing that Jacob, Isaac, and Abraham were alive. Now, if you follow this timeline back, those men at that time, when Moses was talking to God, would have been dead for about 545 years. Okay? They're gone. Their bones may even be dust by that time. All right? And God says, he didn't say I was the God. He says, I am the God. Okay? And he says this, he is not the God of the dead, but of the God of the living. Ye therefore do greatly err. So Jesus is claiming that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are alive, not dead. Why does this matter? It says here, and Jesus answered to them and said, Do you not therefore err, because ye know not the scriptures, neither the power of God? I've given you my testimony many times about when I was shot. Okay, when I was shot was a time in my life where it really kind of changed my path, my direction. Why? Well, previously to that, I never thought of death before. I'd never thought of the afterlife. But during that process, I thought about it a lot. Okay, it was really heavily on my mind, and even my wife, when she went through our first pregnancy, life after death began to be a little bit more of a conversation. Like what's going to happen if things don't work out the best way. But I used to just live for the day. To live for my life, to what I would want to do, my goals, my passions, my desires. God was always a secondary idea. Now, I don't recommend that you go and get shot just so you can, start to think about death. This is not a good idea. But what happened is it caused me to really look into what happens when we're done. Most people, maybe not most of you, but I've talked to some that to think about life after this is very hard to do. To have faith in an eternity is really hard because we're creatures that think about now, think about today. We think about health care. We think about retirement, right? This is our concept. And so it's very hard for us to look past that. And even if we do as Christians, we look past it and we say, you know what? I do believe in life after death. But really, if you think about it, most of us maybe really don't even think about that. Or even, we don't believe it as much as we say we do. Maybe we think of it as some kind of spiritual euphoria, right? Where you ever think about that? Maybe you're like a spirit and you're just floating around in space somewhere, bouncing off planets. You're just this little ball of energy or light. Life after death. But what does it mean to have life after death? Yeah, you'll be alive, but just as a single cell organism bouncing around the atmosphere. That's life. Is it not life? You go to heaven and God says, I told you I'd give you life. I didn't tell you what kind of life I'd give you. All right? You're just this eyeballless blob bouncing around the universe. It sounds strange, but many people come up with ideas of what does it mean to have life after death, right? And for me, it's better, I know what I have out here, and it's better for me to live my life for what I can see. And then when I die, death is kind of, this whole church thing, this whole Jesus thing is kind of like a backup plan, right? So if I don't get what I want or do exactly how I think life should be, then when I die, then I guess I'll use it as like a backup plan. And I hope I'm more than just a blob, right? I hope maybe it'd be nice to have wings to fly around, but I don't know what's going to be there. It doesn't matter what's going to be there because I want to spend my best life today, right? And if you're like me, you've had these thoughts. And if you're like me, you live your life in that way as well. Jesus said here to the people who doubted the resurrection, he says this, the resurrection is real. It's not a change. He says it's the resurrection, which it means you, as a dead person, come back to life. Now, the normal person would say, that's weird, because you stink, you're decaying. If you bring my body back to life after I'm dead, it's going to be an ugly, ugly situation. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Once you bring something that's dead back to life, it's not pretty no more. Okay? Yeah. You don't want to do that. But he says here, not only do you doubt the truth of the resurrection, but you're doubting the power of God. Here we are as Christians, and we believe this crazy Bible, right? If you ask somebody, how did mankind come to be? And you would very easily say, well, God took some dust out of the ground, right? He took some dust and he scooped it up, and he took it and he put it in a little ball, and he made man, didn't he? That's what happened with Adam, didn't it? Now, as Christians, we have no problem believing that, right? That God can take dust and make a man. God can take dust and he can make a woman. He can give her long hair and curly noses and all sorts of things, can't he? God can do all sorts of... But when it comes to the resurrection, we have sometimes more of a difficult concept to believe that God can prepare us a new life or God can prepare us a new body. The Bible teaches that when we arise from the dead, or the second resurrection, that we're going to get a new body, an uncorrupted body. Kiriel's body is full of sickness. Hopefully nobody in here is full of cancer. Praise the Lord. Right now, hopefully that never comes. But our bodies get diseased, it gets sick, we have ailments. I knew a girl in the USA, she struggled with worms in her body. And the doctor said you can't get them out. It's crazy. Because she used to eat sand as a little baby. Her mama put her in a sandbox and she would eat sand and she ended up getting worms in her belly. I'm telling you, it's a struggle. And so this idea of the resurrection, many people, we struggle with it, we doubt it. But Jesus said this, it's true. Not only it's true, the power of God says that God can do this. Paul writes this, and I'm going to quote it. But he says, if Jesus Christ did not rise from the dead, one of the big important things for us about Jesus Christ rising from the dead is because he did it to prove to us that we can do it. It's hard to believe that one day maybe you and I, if you're a born-again Christian, will rise from the dead. Isn't that hard to think about? Hard to understand that. But Jesus did this in order to show us, look, I'm telling you, right here before he died, he says, it's true. And then he died and he says, told you so. I told you so. It's true. And I'm telling you, he wants us to live our lives, not as that is a backup plan. When you read through the New Testament, as we're going through Mark, and we're going to go through some more, you're going to see that the Bible teaches that this is secondary life. And the next life is the main course. Okay? Does anybody in here eat dessert first when you sit down to a meal? Do you do this in Brazil? Sometimes? I do. Sometimes we call it a buffet. Svetski stol. Svetski stol. Yeah? I'll go get dessert first, yes? And eat it. And then if I have room, then I'll have salad or something, right? No. The way that God works it out is this is something, but the best is yet to come, they say. Now, it's easy to say that, but it's hard to believe. And I admit, it's very hard for me to believe what I can't see. But that's where the faith comes in. The book of Hebrews teaches us about faith, that the just shall live by faith. Paul, he taught this. He said, if Jesus Christ did not rise from the dead, all right, if he's still dead and we are Christians are going through this life trying to follow a dead man who never rose from the dead, just a bunch of crazy people, then the most miserable people in the world, Paul says this, is you, is me. We as Christians are above all most miserable if Christ did not rise from the dead. So I'm telling you, when you look at your life, when you look at your path, it's no waste of your life to let this life go and to plan for the next life. Think of the words that Jesus said this. He tells his disciples this. He says, invest in the next life, not so much in this life. The Bible doesn't say that. It says this, lay up treasures in heaven, where moth and rust does not corrupt and thieves don't break in and steal. Why would Jesus encourage us to invest in the next life that we can't see? If it's just going to be a bunch of blobs floating around in space, bumping off each other. No. Because God promises us to give us something. He says this, the eye has not seen. You've not seen it. You've not heard it. You've not witnessed anything like what I'm preparing for you. So I'm very proud of my family, my mom, my sister, my dad, my family, who has, when I've come here to Serbia, they've not called me crazy. They've not said that I'm wasting my life, right? They could. I have had friends say this, but they understand that this is an investment. Our life today matters on what happens. This little baby they have, I'm telling you, the time they invest in her to train her up for the Lord is not a waste of time. You know, sometimes to not be able to work or to have the career that you want, it's not a waste of time. To invest in what you can't see, the Bible teaches, is better than investing in this life, having all the cars and the toys and the trinkets that you want. Right, Milos? But the Bible teaches that this next life is the best life. I'm telling you, that's the life that we need to work on investing in. I wanted to bring this to your attention just because I know that many times we struggle with this concept. Even as Christians, we want the best today. We want to live in the best land, the best place, make the best money. But I'm telling you, that's not what life's about. Jesus here told the Sadducees about the resurrection. It's going to happen. He even proved it to us with his own body. He even proved it in life when he resurrected a guy named Lazarus. Over and over, Jesus was saying, no, it's true. I can do this. I have the power to bring you back if you'll just trust in me. Didn't he? You know what they said about Lazarus before he came from the grave? They bring him up, and Jesus says, I'm going to go into that tomb. And his friends were like, no, don't do it. And Jesus is going into the grave. And he says, no, don't do it. And he says, why? He's like, because he stinks. His dead body is already stinking. He's been in the grave for 3 days and he's already stinking. Yeah. Like me and Lubicia on a hard day's work. Yeah, he stinketh. Yeah. And so Jesus says, that doesn't matter. I can fix stink. Are you thankful that he can fix stink? Yeah? Okay. So he walks into that grave. He stands on the outside and says, Lazarus, guess what? Come forth. He didn't touch him. He wasn't there physically to grab him and pull him out. He just spoke, and guess what happened? Lazarus wakes up, gets up, and I'm sure maybe it would be funny to talk to Lazarus someday. I believe Lazarus is alive today, just like Abraham and Jacob, Isaac. Lazarus tells us the story someday. He's like, yeah, I was in the grave, and all of a sudden I heard the words of the Lord, and I woke up. Whew! What is that? Oh, that's me. He might say, huh? It'd be a funny story to hear someday, wouldn't it? So I just wanted to be an encouragement to you, because honestly, I need that encouragement as I go through my life, my day, and things never turn out like I want them to be. Sometimes you feel like maybe you're wasting your life, or your life is empty in this pursuit, or you'll never get to the place in life where you really want to be. You know what? That's perfectly fine, because God's not designed your life to be perfect. God's not designed your life to have everything that you want to get or you think you need to get. This is a temporary place. Okay? If I was to draw, how do I give a picture in this? Maybe because I'm a nerd, I'll try this, okay? You'll know how TV screens work, okay? Inside the TV screen, there's little bitty, what are they called? Photons? Or photochelia? Little bitty things, right? Tiny ones. And there's each on this screen. I don't know how many are on this screen. If you get real close, you can kind of see a dot, a real small dot, okay? That dot, let's just call that a Milosh dot. Okay, and now if I was to take my pen, and one of those dots is about the size of this pen, if I was to go up here and put a dot right there, that would be Milosh. Milosh is going to get to live probably 60 years if he's blessed, 80 years if he eats healthy and lots of salads and green stuff, right? Right? It won't be a very good life, but you'll live a long time. Okay, no. But, so this one dot is Milosh. He's going to live maybe that 80 years, and that's it. That's the one shot he gets. But what Jesus says is, I'm preparing not just a place for you, but a new life for you, where you're going to live with a physical body, physical eyes. The Bible says you will be known as you're known. So when I see Dragolub, I'm like, hey, Shtai Manova. I'll see him, I'll recognize him as he is. Okay? Now, when we die, you see all these other dots? I mean, there's got to be millions of dots on this screen. You're going to live, if each dot is 80 years, you're going to live every one of those dots on. But not just on this TV screen. How many TV screens are in Novi Sad? Now you take all those dots. You're going to live all those dots as well. How many TV screens are in Serbia? Innumerable. That's the word for eternity. 80 times 80 times 80 times 80 times 80 times 80. You're going to live that for eternity. And you know what I'm doing? We call it, in the USA, we have a phrase called, I'm banking on it. It just means I'm planted on that. I have no other option. I believe this and I'm focused on this. When I married my wife, there was no backup plan. There was no other girl in my life. I said, I'm going to live with her and that's going to be it. Okay? I'm banking on her. All right? So I'm trusting the Lord that, you know what? It doesn't matter if you feel like you're wasting your life or you're not the right place that you think you should be, because this life is not what matters. What you do in this life for Him, yes, that matters. But when we die, man, Milosh, sometimes you look at me and you say, Daddy, I want to play. Sometimes Daddy has too much work. He can't play all the time. You know what? someday when we get there, we're going to have all the time in eternity to do what we want to do. If for now we have to sacrifice a little bit more, if for now that we have to give up a little bit more of ourselves to do the work that God's asked us to do, that's okay. You know that? Some might say that you guys are missing out on life. I don't think so. All we're doing is preparing you for the best life. And that's what Jesus taught. Listen, he went around to villages and to cities. People were diseased, they were poor, they were hungry. He gave them some food, but he never pulled them out of their bad situations. Yes, he cast a demon out from somebody, he fixed someone's health situation, but he didn't go to the villages and say, hey, life's better in Jerusalem. Come with me. No, it wasn't his job to change their life, but to give them hope. And that hope was for a place called heaven, where he said he's prepared wonderful things for you and I. And right here in chapter 18, or in chapter 12, in verse 18, he talks to these religious people and says, you know what? No, there is life after death. And he says in other places that you should focus more on that than on this. You know, we got Kirill here, is a tech guy. Let's see, we got piano guy, music guy. He's forced to be a tech guy, Sergey, but in his heart, he's a music guy, okay? And we have all these things that we do, our talents. You know, when we die, that's it. There'll be no more programming in heaven. I hope there'll be no computers in heaven or cell phones. We'll see. Oh no. Will heaven be heaven if we have to have cell phones? She says, no, I don't think so either. Yes? All this stuff that we try to plan on our careers, you've only got about 60 more years left with that. And I'm telling you, what you invest in this life, that matters all so much more importantly for the next life. And I'm here to tell you that I believe it's worth it. One missionary that went down to South America, you probably heard the guy's name, I can't think of his, Elliot, Elizabeth Elliot's husband. You ever heard of him? Jim Elliot. He went down to these tribes in South America. He got killed or eaten or something, whatever it was. He said this, he said, call no man crazy, basically, summary, of a man who gives up that which he cannot hold or keep. Okay? Call no man crazy to give away what he can't hold on to gain or to keep that which he cannot lose. I'm telling you, that's worth it. And that's powerful. That's my Jesus. That's what he taught. And when you follow his teachings, you're going to find out that he taught pretty heavily on the resurrection of your body and of a wonderful new place yet to come. Is it hard to believe? Yes, I would say it's hard to believe. Is God creating man and woman from the dust of the ground? Is that hard to believe? Which one's harder for God? To make man out of dust or to take your dusty bones and put them back together?
Not.
They're the same. Dust turns into dust. It's the same. Okay? There's scientists coming out today that have followed the path of molecular biology, of molecular evolution. You know, molecular evolution, about living chemicals, whatever. And they're saying now it's impossible for non-living chemicals to become living. Well, of course it's impossible. So what's the other option? Well, it's that God created. And if we serve a creating, living God, then it's not impossible for God to take your bones, to God to take your dead body, and to resurrect it, but then also to make you a brand new body someday, that we can live in perfect peace and harmony. That's an everlasting body. And it sounds like a story. It sounds like, I'm telling you, that's the hope that Jesus Christ taught. And that's the hope that we have as Christians. It's a pretty awesome thing, isn't it? What do you want to do for eternity? He wants to sail on a dolphin's back in a crystal river. Is it a crystal clear river or a river of crystals? Okay. All right. Nikolai, what do you want to do for eternity?
Ride on a cheetah, really super fast.
Ride on a cheetah.
Super fast.
Super fast. Wow. You know what I want to do? I want to travel around and see all of God's beautiful creation that He's going to make. I also want to spend time with Jesus, and I want to ask Him all the questions and say, why was this? Or why did that happen? Or what about this? You know it? I think it's going to be a wonderful time. And to get to spend time with you guys and with Mama, that's what God's got planned for us. And Amelia. Yeah.
And met thousands new people who we never met, but who
Right.
take care with us.
Anytime I get to travel around, even Serbia, going to Zrenjanin, going to Niš, and I get to meet these Christians, it's like, get to meet some Christians from Belarus. It's like, man, when we get there, it's going to be a whole different story. You know it? And I'm excited. Jesus taught the resurrection, and He believed the resurrection. So what should we do? Right. We should live our life not just as we know, as knowledge, but believing. You know the difference between believing and knowledge?
Knowledge is know, and like
It's hard to explain, isn't it?
if God want, if Mommy says, Nikolai, do you want to go to Daddy somewhere? We say yes or will.
Knowledge is knowing there's McDonald's down the road here. But believing there's a McDonald's makes me want to go get a cheeseburger. Right?
Believing is like if Mommy says Nikolai, go down the store and get us some milk. And believing is like I think there's a
Knowledge and belief. Knowledge is the idea of knowing something, but belief is that further step of action based on it. You may believe in a resurrection, in an afterlife. You may know or think that, but do you actually believe that? That's a good question to ask all of ourselves. And what would it look like if our lives truly reflected a belief in the resurrection, in a new life, in eternity? That's how I want to live my life. And that's how Christ asks us to live our life. Pretty awesome, isn't it? All right. Well, we're going to be dismissed here. We're going to have another song. And the next week we'll be into chapter 13. Chapter 13 talks about Him going out of the temple. And the disciples went with Him. And they said, Master, see what manner of stones and what manner of buildings are here. And Jesus said unto him, Seest thou these great buildings? There shall not be one stone left upon another that shall not be thrown down. And He's talking about even His body, talking about resurrecting His body later on. Again, the resurrection. If He can do it for Himself, it's one thing to do it to somebody else, but it's another thing to do it to yourself. Right? If I was a brain surgeon, I would be a talented brain surgeon if I can open up Lubisha's head, take his little skull off, bloop, and if I could get into his brain and take out the diseases. I'd be a pretty good doctor, right? But how much better of a doctor would I be if I did it to myself with mirrors? Maybe crazy, okay? But that's the concept, that Jesus can do this to Himself. Amen?